Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to can pears, and then I'm going to make some pear honey. And pear honey, it's kind of compared to like an apple butter or a pear butter. So I've got a lot of pears here, and I've already washed them. And these are Bartlett pears, and they're green, but then when they start to get ripe, they turn yellow like this. They're all just the right amount of ripe. If you canned the really hard green ones, then your fruit would be really hard when you go to eat it. And I'm doing a raw pack again today. And there are recipes out there where you can cook your pears and then you pack them, and that's called a hot pack. So mine are all ready to go, and this isn't even all of my pears. I have a lot of pears. So the first thing I need to do is peel and chop a couple of these, and then I've got 10.5 cups of water in my stock pot here. Of course, I have my canning pot ready and my jars that I washed, and they're ready to go. So we need to make the fruit juice first that I'll be canning my pears in. And so I'm just going to peel my pears, and if they're just the right amount of ripe, they'll be kind of soft and juicy. And I've got a couple of lemons, just in case my process ends up taking me a little bit longer. I want to be able to put some lemon juice on them so they don't turn brown. And then of course cut off any bad spots. And I've got 2 knives and 2 peelers. And then I do have a bucket down here for my waste that will go out to the compost. And then in my peach video, somebody had made a comment that with my peels, I could dehydrate them. So that is what I'm going to do with my peels this time. So I've got a bowl here to put those in. And then for my pears that are just going in the water in my stock pot, I probably don't even need to core them, but I'm going to, just so I don't have to worry about it, because I will be straining this mixture out anyways. And you don't really even need to cut this up, but it kind of gives everything a head start. So this will go into my water. And that's 10.5 cups of water. And I'm going to put 2 pretty large pears in the water. If you have small pears, then you would go with maybe 3. And we want to get this done first because we do need to bring it up to a boil and get our fruit soft enough that we can mash it, make our fruit juice, and then we do need to have it cool. It doesn't have to be ice cold by any means, but it does need to be cooled off so we can do the raw pack. Although I don't know if it really truly matters if it's completely cooled off, because our jars will be cold and our water in our big canning pot is cold, and then we bring it all up to a boil at the same time. So I don't know that it really matters the temperature of our juice. So the reason I'm doing 7 quarts is because that is how many will fit in my canning pot at one time. And so for 7 quarts, I plan on about 1.5 cups of juice per quart. I did that same guesstimation with my peaches, and I ended up with extra juice. And it's just fine. I'd rather have too much juice than not enough. And then I can use the juice when I go to make my pear honey and just add that in with my other liquid and pears that go in with my pear honey. Although there isn't any liquid that goes into the pear honey, it's just the pears. And my pears are the perfect ripeness to be canned. They're soft, but they're still firm and delicious. Let me turn this on while I'm talking. I'm going to turn it on high just to bring it up to a boil. I don't like to can my pears in a syrup. That way it doesn't have any extra sweetness to it. And then when I want to use these pears or just eat them, there isn't a lot of extra sweetness or sugar, especially if I'm going to use them in a recipe. And I wasn't sure which peeler I wanted to use, but I feel like, well, maybe that one's easier. I don't know. I'm going back and forth between my peelers to see which one I like best. Once you start peeling your pears, they do get kind of slippery, so be careful. And usually when I'm making jam or something like that, I don't peel my pears. I will be peeling my pears for my pear honey just because I want it to be a really smooth texture. But whenever I make pear jam, like my Pear Vanilla jam, it's in my cookbook, and I also have a video here on my channel of it, I leave the skins on. because I really like the texture that it gives to the jam, and it also helps to thicken up my jam without pectin. But for just canning them, I've never left the skins on. I've always worried that after they sit in the jars for a while, the peel will come off and sink to the bottom, and then you'll have a really pretty jar of canned pears and skin floating in the bottom. So I don't really want that. And I could bottle them just halves like this. I think I can fit more in the jar if I slice them. And I might even slice them and then cut them in half just so they fit better in the jars. And they look like potatoes once you get them cut up. So I'm just going to keep going with my pears and wait for my water to come up to a boil. While I'm waiting for my water to come up to a boil, I'm just mashing my pears. They're already soft enough to just mash. And now that it's up to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer for a good 10 minutes or so. So my pear juice has been simmering for about 10 minutes. I've turned it off and I'm just going to let it set. I did juice my 2 lemons, and I've poured a little bit of lemon juice into the 2 jars that I've got already prepared. Pears turn brown a lot faster, so I'm trying to stay ahead of that while I get the rest of my jars filled. So I've got all of my jars filled. Now I just need to strain my juice very carefully because it's still hot. And this isn't all of it, but I'm just going to pour in and see how much I need before I strain the rest of it. And even though it's still warm, it's not boiling hot. And it looks like I'll have just enough with a little bit extra because we still need to debubble. So I've just got my plastic knife, so I'm just going to go through, try not to cut any of my pears. Not that the knife is so sharp, but the pears are nice and soft. And then once we debubble, I might need to top off the liquid. And if you run out of pear juice, you can just top them off with a little bit of water. And I was worried that they would turn more brown than they are, so that's good. This first jar is a little more brown than the other ones, but that's all right. So I'm just filling the jars up to this bottom rim here. And because these are wide mouth jars, I didn't use my funnel. So now we're just going to clean off each rim. And in case you're not aware, the reason that you wipe off the rim is so your lid really gets a good seal. And because this is a raw pack, I don't need to heat up my lids or my jars. And then we'll just go finger tight. And then the pears that I've strained for the juice here, I'm just going to dump right back into my saucepan and use that for part of my pear honey. That way we're not wasting anything. And then I do have some water in here, but we'll probably need to top it off. And I'm going to turn it on high while I'm loading in my jars. I'll pour my juice back into my stock pot as well. And we don't need a lot of extra water. You want enough water to come up about an inch above the jars, which in this size of a pan with quart jars, it's kind of hard to get it an inch above. So I just go as much as I can so it won't boil over and make a mess everywhere when it comes up to a boil. So put the lid on so it comes up to a boil faster. And then once this comes up to a boil, I can start my timer. In the recipe that I'm following from this book that I've showed you before, so for pears, it is a 30-minute boiling water bath. So for my altitude, it's 40 minutes. And you don't start your timer until it starts boiling. And while that's coming up to a boil, I can finish getting all of my other pears taken care of for my pear honey, and then get that cooking while this is processing. And then when it's settled down and not a boil anymore, once I remove my pears, I can put in my jelly jars for the pear honey. So my water is almost up to a boil. I'm just juicing one more lemon so I can get my pear honey going. I'm doing a double batch, but I'll put a single batch recipe in the description box. And instead of using sugar, I'm going to use honey. So for 4 cups of pears, it is 3 cups of sugar. So I'm doing 8 cups of pears with 2 cups of honey. Because my pears are ripe, they are sweet already. So I'm using just the juice of 2 lemons. You could zest your lemons and put that in too, but I don't want to have chunks in my pear honey. So there's my lemon juice, my pears, I've got my 2 cups of honey. And even though I still have the mashed pears and a little bit of water in my stock pot, I'm not concerned about that because I'm going to cook it down till it's pretty thick. And then I do need a half a teaspoon of salt. So in went my salt. I'm turning that on low. I'm going to get my honey in first. And then I'm going to dump in my pears and my lemon juice. And I'll turn the heat up to about medium. I don't want this to rapidly boil, but I want it to come up enough to get everything warm through, melt my honey, and then soften my pears so I can really mash them with my potato masher. And this is up to a boil, so I'm going to turn it down to about medium and set my timer for 40 minutes. And then I've got a towel ready and my jar lifter and then hot pads just in case for when I need to take those out. I'm going to be putting them pretty far over here, so when I'm ready to jar my pear honey, I have all of this area here. In fact, I'm going to move it even further over here. It's a really long way, but I find that it's so useful if I have all of my stuff out for canning. I'm going to do as much as I can while I have everything out and my kitchen is already a mess. So my pears and my honey are just coming up to a boil. I'm going to turn the heat down to about medium-low. And I'm just stirring it around. I'm going to start mashing it and get all of those pears broken up. And one of the things I love about a big spoon like this is you can just mash big chunks against the side of the pan and get them broken up too. So right now, this is the color and consistency of, about applesauce. I want it to be a lot thicker than this. I don't want it to be as thick as a jam. I still want it to be a little bit runny, but there's still a lot of liquid in here that I want to reduce down and make my pear honey a little bit thicker. My pears have about 7 minutes left, and then way back there, I don't know if you can see it or not, I got my dehydrator out and I put all of the peels spread out on my dehydrator, so as soon as I get enough kitchen space I can start that and get my dehydrated pear peels. I think those will be delicious. So I'm going to let this settle down for about 5 minutes before I take the jars out and put on my towel. And I've got other things ready for my pear honey, even though I'm not ready for it yet. It's really far away. They sure look nice in their jars. So now we just wait for those to cool off and listen for them to seal. And someone had mentioned that if you put vinegar in the water, it will help with the hard water film that develops. And I forgot to do that. So once these cool off to room temperature and I make sure that they are all sealed, I'll clean off my jars and then write on the lids what they are and the date. So I want that to get a little bit thicker, and that gives me time to get everything else ready while that is finishing. So I've got a hot pad here for the big stock pot, of course my other things, and then I've got another hot pad here for my little pan of lids that is in the back. And then my rings are here, I've got my funnel, my lid lifter, and then I do have my headspace measurer, which I'm not I didn't use on this one about a 1/2 inch, which is about where this ring is here. So I didn't use that. For a single batch of pear honey, it says that it makes 5 1/2 pints, which are these little 8-ounce jelly jars. I've got 10 here just because it's a double batch. I don't think I'll use them all, but we'll see. So my lids are nice and hot. And my pear honey is as thick as I want it to be. And I've had my jars in this hot water, and I ended up putting in 1 extra jar. So I've got 11 jars in there, and it's on about medium to keep my jars hot. And then it won't take so long to bring it up to a boil for its water bath. And then I've got my ladle and my dish rag. Got everything ready. Bring all of this closer. And I'm going to go 2 jars at a time. Funnel. And then I usually give it a stir, just so one jar isn't chunky and the other one is pretty liquidy. Try to evenly distribute the chunks. And then we need a 1/2 inch headspace. And I could go a little more. And then wipe the rim. Get a lid. Get a ring. Finger tight. And then back in the water. I think that one could use a little bit more. So I ended up with 8 jelly jars, and then this little bit. It probably would have been enough to do a little teeny 1/2 a jelly jar size. But that will be perfect, and then I can taste it. So I turn this back up to high. This needs to come back up to a boil, and then once it's at a boil, I'll put the lid on now. This only has to water bath for 5 minutes. So 15 minutes for my altitude. My pear honey is all finished. And I didn't mention, but I did have the water an inch above my jars. And it looks just like applesauce, I think. And this bowl has thickened up quite a bit because it's been sitting out. So I imagine it would be even thicker after being in the fridge. And all that's in here is just the honey and the lemon juice and the pears. You could put cinnamon or something like that if you wanted that. But it's a really nice consistency for spreading on toast or mixing in oatmeal. This would be really good on a muffin. I'm going to give it a bite. That is so good. I think so much of it depends on the flavor of your fruit, and those pears are delicious, so my pear honey is delicious. I don't want to double dip. Although it's my house, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm so happy with this. And even though it's pretty much just a pear jam, it's a little bit different than my pear vanilla jam, which I'm going to be making next. But I don't mind. It tastes good, and sometimes maybe you don't want vanilla. And it sure looks nice in the jars. And then the same thing with these jars. Once they come to room temperature, I'll wipe them off and then write the date and the name on them. And these pears are going to be so delicious in the middle of winter. Can make a pie, just eat them, whatever. And it looks so nice in the jars. Let me know if you decide to make any of these recipes with pears. Such a great way to have fresh fruit throughout the winter. It won't be fresh anymore, but it's a great way to preserve the fresh flavor now. But thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.